Yep, magic. So once again, my name is Martin Pratchett. I'm the Engineering Practice Manager here at Engineering New Zealand. On the line with me, we've got Holly from ACE New Zealand and Adam Thornton, who is one of our preeminent producer statement experts, and very lucky to have him along. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is talking about the survey results that we sent out a couple of months ago, the proposed changes that we have as a result of that survey. And then Adam will be introducing the producer statement A series that he's been working on. So first thing is why do we use producer statements in the first place? And so a producer statement no longer has a producer statement does not have a legal status in New Zealand, but we do use it to show as a statement that our calculations, drawings, designs comply with the New Zealand Building Code. And so we've been getting some feedback for a while that the producer statements hadn't been updated for a number of years, and that it was time to do so. So ACE New Zealand and Engineering New Zealand sent out a survey about what members felt was required, to make them fit for purpose now. And so we got a fair amount of feedback, which was great. Thank you for your time in filling that out. So one of the big ones was there wasn't enough space to be able to fill in the fields, that the forms weren't flexible enough, and that the different disciplines felt that it was very focused around particularly around the structural space. And so for disciplines like fire engineering, geotechnical engineering, they present things, they typically work off of reports as opposed to the way that structural engineers work. And so it was difficult for them. Parts of the forms were confusing. A large part of that was because it still related back to the days when we had them linked in with the architects as well, and also that it was difficult to link the producer statement to other documents. Some more of it was that one of the issues could be that if you signed a producer statement, then somebody could take that producer statement and potentially use it for a job site where you hadn't intended it to be used. Which could take some issues. So it was open to fraudulent use. Takes too long to complete. All the different paperwork that you need to be able to put in there with a consent application these days, and also that it doesn't cater for the different membership classes. And so we have CPEng, but you've also got your engineering geologists, chartered members, chartered member technologists, and chartered member technician classes as well. Excuse me. And so after reviewing the documents, After reviewing the documents, we came up with some proposed changes, and Holly and I have been discussing these with Adam. And one of the things that we've done is suggested that we could put in a separate page, so with a reference for additional information that you can put in there. So Schedule 1 essentially. We should be able to provide flexibility for a wider range of disciplines. We think that we've done that with the way that the forms are doing, but if that's not the case, then we would like some examples from the likes of fire engineers and geotechnical engineers from the way that they would like to adopt the producer statements. To reduce fraud, what we've done is we thought, how can we link that back to your files? And the obvious answer was to put a job number on there. And so I'm sure that everybody has a filing system where they may be putting in a job number, which is for their own internal records only. And so, we're proposing to put in a field where you'll be able to put your job number into the top, and that'll link it straight back to your files. And at the moment, with the PDFs that we have, they're very tight, and it's just CPEng, and there's also things about architects in there as well. And so we're proposing to put in drop-down boxes on forms for construction monitoring and also around the different classes that are available as well. Now, excuse me, I'm just going to make that full screen on my screen. Can everybody get a reasonable view of what we've got there? So these are mock-ups. They're an iteration or two ago now of the producer PS1 and the PS2, the front pages there. As you can see up the top here, we're proposing to put in the job number. Some of the feedback that came back was that, you know, when you're doing the work, potentially there's not a lot or a DP and so on available at the moment, and so we've added this box in here, which is you know, in case it hasn't been subdivided or so on yet. And we are adding in a schedule too, and so we've incorporated this into the document, and you can see that we've started referring to it through the throughout the document here. And so you've got, you know, the proposed building work covered by the producer statement, described on the drawing, specified in the schedule on page 2, and so on in there. So if you're running out of room, then you can just use it there. With the these will be drop-down boxes. These are drop-down boxes now. I can't share my screen, unfortunately, but much the same as we have here. And so we are looking at whether it should automatically default to CM3 as a basic minimum that people would be putting in, or whether it should be left blank so that the engineer must go through and automatically select it. And then here what we have is that if you are CPeng, then you can just come along, type in your name as usual. If you're CPeng, then of course you're already LBP3 for, you know, residential work, and you just tick that box and you don't need to worry about the rest of it. Otherwise, to be doing certainly residential work, then you need to be LBP3 as well as being a chartered member or a chartered technologist or a chartered technician. And so we've left that in there, and you will need to be able to provide evidence of that. And then you put your qualifications down there. The PS2 form is much the same. We've adapted it so that you've got your job number up here, and much of the information is following through as well, and that we are putting in a schedule so that you can have more work, so more room to put in the things that you're describing. And down here as well, similarly for the chartered members of the different classes. Okay, so we've got some questions coming through. So B2 is normally excluded via a separate letter accompanying the producer statement. Can this be tagged out in the proposed template to avoid having to provide the B2 exclusion? I'm unsure what you mean by tagged out. I would suggest that if you're doing work where you're looking at that, so I'm assuming a structural engineer, then you would be you could put that onto the schedule. The building code clauses at the top is a bit too short to fill in the relevant bits for fire engineering practice. Can we please make it longer? Yeah, hey, look, it's, you know, as I said, if you've got some examples of what you want, then please send it through. Will Engineering New Zealand make this a legal document and mandatory for all projects? Well, we don't actually have the authority to make things a legal document or mandatory for all projects. We don't make the laws. How will this work with the likes of Auckland Council who have their own producer statement forms? So The Auckland Council will accept Engineering New Zealand producer statement forms. And can these forms still be handwritten or now must be typed in? No, you'll be able to print them off and type them in. When does this kick them in? Well, there's going to be quite a lot of legal review. This webinar and the feedback that we're getting from it is part of our review process. And so we're going to be adapting the feedback and so on that we're getting in here. Then it's got to go through legal reviews and so on, and through the marketing to make it all done. Will there be editable versions of this, i.e. Word doc? Holly will be talking about the options that we've got going on in there. There are issues around making editable versions of this, particularly if they have the Engineering New Zealand and ACE New Zealand logos on it, because there are certain things in there that that we only that we have to have in there to have our logos on there, and that people like BCAs depend upon it, and they know that those items in there are in there too. Changing to job reference, that's a good point. Building code clauses, not a bad idea. Yep, we can certainly maybe. We'll put that into the maybes. Okay, so changes to the PS4. So similarly, what we've done is we have, I missed the arrow on there. Changes to the PS4, job number added for fraud protection. The drop-down box is the same. So one of the things that we've done is we've spoken to the Institute of Architects, and of course, for those of you that know, architects no longer use producer statements. So we've decoupled everything from the architects and removed all references to them. Put in the schedule on page 2, which is now going to be schedule 1, and changes to the different membership classes. We are updating the guidance document as well. Sorry, I'm reading through the questions now. For monitoring construction works, you don't need to be a chartered engineer as long as you state this on the PS4 form. That is what I've been told from Engineering New Zealand. Is this correct? You need to be a suitably qualified or competent person, and so if you are typically what would happen is you can go out and review the work on behalf of a chartered engineer and come back and sign it. You would probably find difficulties. Having your PS4 accepted by a BCA if you weren't chartered. What about the B2 PS4? Well, that's a separate documentation set. CM as a selected level, please. Is that construction monitoring as a selected level, please? Sorry, I don't understand that question. If you could provide a little bit more detail around that, I'd appreciate it. Can the legal description boxes be changed from just lot and DP and SD so that other legal descriptions can be more easily entered? Yes, send me, you've got my email address, Neville. Send me an example of what you've done in the past. Surely the test of a suitably qualified person is a CPEng. Well, CPEng is this is something that we've been discussing. And there are the different membership classes, and all of them are tested. The definition of your chartered professional engineer is that you can work on complex problems, but with a chartered technologist and so on, you can work on broadly defined problems. The question is, of course, operating within your bounds of competency, and whether you're a chartered professional engineer or a chartered technologist or a chartered member or a PNGL, that all comes back to ethical questions, which is why we are strongly working with the ethics side of things, and will be really reinforcing that in the future. Can you do separate PS4s for separate items on the same job, for example, foundations, or can you only do one PS4 at the end of the job?
I am. I could actually make if it just a couple of minutes, I'll just make a few comments on what's come through, if I may. You've suggested it's not a legal document. A producer statement is a legal sense in terms that you're giving an opinion and people are going to rely on it. So it's legal in that sense. It is not, though, a legislative requirement. I think just a slight difference there. Just in terms of the Word document, I think a key issue here is that if people manipulate them and change them, the councils, building consent authorities will, they get concerned. They've then got to read the fine print every time, and that's when we push them towards that. That's when the BCAs tend to say, well, hang on, you guys are breaking the rules. We want you to fill in our own producer statement. And when they produce those, they've invariably been fairly onerous. So that's why we want a protected form that you can only enter data, not change the fine print if you like. There was a comment there about the B2 PS4. I would say there shouldn't be such a thing. If you are asked for a PS4 for B2, there is a form letter within the suite of documents for B2 that is now available both on Engineering New Zealand and the ACE website. I think, Martin, the question about the CM drop-down, you do have that. So there is a drop-down to pick you whether you want to have CM 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. I thought that was a question. And the issue of whether non-CPNGs can sign, I think it's important that the building consent authorities have confidence in the person who's signing it. So they need to be on some national register. Obviously, CPNG is a national register, and if you are an LBP3 licensed building practitioner, grade 3 designer, you will also be on the national register for that. So those are why I think those are the two options that you should have there. Now, sorry, what was that question, Martin, again?
Can you do separate PS4s for separate items on the same job?
Our strong recommendation is you just do one for the end of the job. I know when a building consent authority sends out a consent amendment addendum, it will say, give us a PS4 for this, all these things. I would strongly advise that you say we're giving you one and it covers everything that was in the consented documents. Because theoretically, you're giving them an additional level of indemnity for each producer statement you give. So, which I suggest is not a sensible thing to do.
Thank you, Adam. Now, next question would be, can we have CM0 as, if you don't require any construction monitoring, some TAs get confused if they leave a section blank. Would that be for fire engineers or geotechs? If you're a structural engineer, for example, if you are doing design, then you should be inspecting your work. If so, then yeah, potentially that's something that we could be looking at if it's specifically for one of those different disciplines. Martin, yes, the construction monitoring. Yep, no, we've got that CM level 1 to 5. Yes, I understand the question now. Thank you. We do have a drop-down box to select that. Yep. And will the PS document be aligned with the Building Act for legal documentation? I think that Adam answered that. Can a company not BCA require a PS document even if a structure does not require a building consent? That is something that Adam's going to be talking about after Holly. If you're working within your practice area and ethically, are you implying that a chartered technician can then sign the PS1s because as per your slide, you are giving different options, i.e. CPeng, CMeng, etc., etc. That is the general intent, yes. So that's one of the things that we're looking at is if you are a chartered technician, then you've probably got, 5 to 6 years worth of experience under your belt. You have been assessed by Engineering New Zealand. You would, let's assume that you're looking at the structural residential side of things. Then you would need to be LBP3, and you would need to have, provided that documentation there as well. But yeah, provided that you are acting within your bounds of competency, then yes, that's what we're looking at. So seems to be a link between PS3 and PS4. Can a PS4 be issued without a PS3 completion of building work? Well, the PS4, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, is looking at the work that you have designed and inspected. So I know that some engineering companies insist on a PS3 from the builder, saying that everything that they have done is compliant with their design, because you can only, unless you're there for CM level 5, when you're inspecting everything in your own
Can I just jump in there? I think, again, look, I would say it's very much in your interest to insist on a PS3 before you issue a PS4. The PS4 does state that you're giving the opinion based on information provided by the constructor or the builder. You don't see everything, you are relying on them. So if the builder's not prepared to say he's built it in accordance with the consented documentation, then you might think seriously about whether you want to issue a PS4.
And so we're coming back to Doug's question around the construction monitoring levels, a CM0. So you're saying structural modif, it's really simple. So what are you talking about? Like a timber lintel over a single doorway with a point load on it, and all you're inspecting is the hold downs or something along those lines? Well, it still needs to be inspected by somebody, whether that's a building inspector or not.
Look, I'd give a quick view there. I think if you have issued a PS1 for a job, then it is reasonable, I think, for the Building Consent Authority to say, please give us a PS4 for the work that you've designed. So, it has to be pretty minor before I think you would just, you can justify not doing any construction monitoring.
Yes, that's the way that we've tested it as well. So PS4s typically require supporting documentation to be added to them, such as site inspection reports. Will the PS4 format accommodate addendum pages? Yeah, no, we are looking at putting that in, absolutely. It should be able to refer to the site inspection reports and site instructions and so on. It's easier to forge a producer statement. Can you have it to them issued online? Holly's talking to that. Is CPeng generally recognised by all BCAs in New Zealand, or do any require other independent registration? Some local authorities want you to be on their producer statement list. Auckland is a good example of that. What about the structural and civil part of the design? Will the PS4 differ? Well, if you are the author of the PS1 and you've done both, then I would assume that the PS4 would either still be the one document. One PS4 at the end of the construction may not be realistic, as the project may involve different parties, structural, civil, and geotechnical, so it's hard to have one CPeng to sign off one PS4 on behalf of 4 parties. That's bigger projects than I've worked on. Adam, can you address that one?
Yeah, look, I think that might be a misunderstanding. The earlier question was, should you give multiple PS4s during the process of the construction? And the advice is no, you shouldn't. But sure, look, if you've got a geotechnical engineer issuing a PS1, then that geotechnical engineer should issue a PS4 for the checking that the ground meets his the expectations of his design report. Similarly, for the structural engineer, should give a PS4 for the structural work, and so on. I'm not suggesting that this one PS4 would cover all the different disciplines.
Thank you. Now, Michelle, can Engineering New Zealand provide a template PS3 for contractors? The 6th schedule certificate isn't always appropriate. This hasn't, so we
it's
had
a good
discussion
question.
about this yesterday.
This one's been kicked around.
I'm going to hand this one back to you again. Sorry, Adam.
I think it's a good suggestion, and we should take that on board and just see if we can do it. We'd have to get buy-in from the different contracting organisations and things that make sure that it's something that they would accept as a regulation type document. Certainly, the amount of information and if you like, the quality of a PS3 is a lot lower than a PS4. So there may be some pushback from our contracting colleagues.
Thank you. And one for me. Assume ENZ will release a beta version for industry user to provide feedback on before it goes live. Once again, Holly's going to be talking about a bit of a beta version for that. I don't believe that we would be typically releasing a pre-release of a producer statement for people to be using.
Sorry, I missed that.
Adam, I haven't
missed that question. Sorry, what was the question?
In the past. Adam, do you know how have we done it in the past? Have you had any? So, assuming Engineering New Zealand will release a beta version for industry users to provide feedback on before it goes live. Well, to a certain extent, that's what we're doing now. You know, we're gathering a lot of feedback. If there's not, you know, huge disagreements on what we're proposing, then, you know, and we are asking for feedback, by the way, in the survey that you will receive at the end of this presentation. So please do.
Yeah. Sorry, look, I absolutely agree. And this, again, that's the point of this webinar, is to try and get some feedback. So perhaps when is it possible, Martin, when this gets loaded up for people can view it, there would also be some just PDF versions of what's proposed. So if people want to make specific comments, they can zoom in and have a look and then make some comments. Yeah, it's not a beta version, and you can't use it. And it'll be a PDF version, and you can stamp preliminary all over it. So it is just for people to give consideration. I mean, what Martin's talking about today is really a change of format to make it easier and simpler for people to use it. So there's no great change. There's no sort of legal change proposed in this current amendment. So it's a usefulness question, really.
Is there any way the PS1 and PS4 for a job can be linked to transfer the project information from PS1 to PS4? Holly, talking about what is minor and what you don't have to do inspections on, I would suggest that you watch the webinar that I did with Auckland Council about remote inspections, and also the article that I wrote, which is on our website if you Google remote construction monitoring. Michelle's sort of answering that question as well. So from Jacques, sorry, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Chartered Member Engineering New Zealand question for signing PS1 and PS2. Are LBP level 3 applicable for bridge and civil structural engineers as well? LBP is residential. Should the PS1 be conditional on engagement to carry out construction monitoring? Well, someone needs to be carrying out the construction monitoring, but you know, if you are, for example, in Auckland and you know, your job's in Chatham Islands, then it may not be realistic for you to be carrying out the construction monitoring, but it would need to be carried out by an engineer. And so I don't think it's necessary for the design engineer to
but there is an obligation, in my view, for the design engineer to satisfy himself as to the competency of the person that he's asking to do the construction monitoring remotely, if you like. So, you know, so you pick another a firm, or make sure it's a CPN who has experience in the type of construction that's going on, and then because you are going to rely on his reports to you, and then on the basis of that you can write a PS4.
That would be if you was going to be signing off the PS4, but you know, the engineer on the remote location.
To me that's a slightly different situation. There's two ways you can do remote construction monitoring. You can either pass the whole job over, but invariably there are RFIs, questions from the contractor, and issues to be resolved, which is usually best done by the designer. So, you know, it's not just a case of having a look. You're doing an inspection and doing a PS4 usually. But it may be the case where, I guess, for a small residential, just perhaps one inspection or two inspections, and you may have an arrangement with the local engineer to do a PS4. But so there's two ways to go. I would suggest the more common and easier way is for the designer still to issue the PS4, having satisfied himself that the person who's doing the inspection is suitably qualified and that they've done sufficient inspections.
Yeah. Once again, sort of refer people to the remote construction monitoring to the webinar that we did in conjunction with Auckland Council and the article that I wrote on it. So it's uncommon to see conditions calling for a PS4 stating that ground conditions, etc., were in accordance with the geotech report that was submitted at the time of the building consent application, when in fact there has been no such geotech report done. Sorry, let me read that question again. Come on, see. All right. So stating that there was that the ground conditions were in accordance with the geotech report that was submitted at the time of the building consent application, when there was no such geotech report done. Well, if there was no geotech report done, then I don't see how you can write a statement.
I would, if I may, I'd suggest that in such a case you should, write back to the Building Consent Authority, ask them to change their conditions because they are not, not correct. I mean, it will obviously be a standard condition they put in. So I guess that would only be in residential developments where you are relying on the builder to satisfy the requirements of the 3604 pile requirements, whatever it is. So you're relying on that sort of process instead, and you could point that out to the council.
And from Graham, all in caps locks, crikey. So type 1 structures like farm buildings, we often do not ask for a PS4. So is this, Graham, are you from a consenting authority? Particularly in timber and even state, the local authority should do the inspection.
Look, that's fine, and I think that works well in remote areas.
Okay.
Or I have to say that some of the let's say the rural building inspectors have a really good experience and understanding of their areas, and so it is appropriate to do it that way. I get you can make an argument. It does mean that the BCA assumes the responsibility for the inspections and the construction monitoring.
And for Auckland Council PS2 forms that state that all statements must include B2. Can B2 be excluded if the design review has not been specifically carried out? For
well, if there is, I would say that B2 should always be designed for and also always reviewed. That doesn't mean to say that you are going to issue a producer statement. Again, I'd refer you to the B2 suite of documents that's been issued. Our advice is that you don't issue a PS2 for B2 or a PS1, but you use one of the letters which are now, I understand, widely and accepted by all BCAs. So there's a suite of a letter in lieu of a PS1, there's one in lieu of a PS2, and there's one in lieu of a PS4. So, and there's also some explanatory documentation. There's a little advisory that goes with that documentation, worth having a look at if you haven't already seen it.
And with the proposed changes to Schedule 1 of the Building Act, most of the exemptions required CPEN's involvement to the design. Will engineers then be required to issue a PS4, as there won't be a building consent number to issue a PS4?
Leave that to me. Leave that to me and the series A series producer. That's one of the uses that these things could be put to.
And the templates being Word, we've addressed that, and earlier. Are BCAs aware of these changes, and will they be specifically presented to with what the changes mean for them? Yeah, we are. I've got pretty good contacts with the vast majority of the BCAs now, and I will be talking to them about these changes. Yes.
So I just jump in. I think again, I'd repeat what I said before, that
were you going to say it?
we're not that this is not a legal change, if you like, not a change to the intent or the what's behind a producer statement. It's just really a way to make it easy to fill in. Now, the one question, the one point which may be different there is about allowing an LVP Design 3 to fill out producer statement. And so, look, I'd suggest that would be good to get people's comments on that, whether that's a smart idea or whether it's not. And I think there'll also be a legal review of just how that's handled. So, but apart from that, there is really no major changes for the BCAs to be concerned about. It'll look a bit different, but the wording is effectively the same.
And when do we start to use these new forms? As I said, when they're issued. What will happen if a PS1 was issued using the new form and PS4 is required after activating the new form? As Adam's just said, there's not really that much of a. We're not changing the content of it so much as the style and making it less confusing for people. That's not addressed for us. PS4 is for a building consent. Okay, Adam's going to be addressing that later. For remote monitoring, can photographs build confidence for the designer? Read the article and watch the webinar. And for Gordon, which I think is probably the last one for my presentation, my question was to enable the PS1 issuer to be satisfied that construction monitoring will be carried out either by the designer or another approved engineer. Well, that's where you're putting down saying that. Sorry, give me a second. I'll just flip back to the slide. Oops. Now, where are we? That's what we've got here. We recommend the CM3 level of construction monitoring. As someone asked, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Yes, that will be a drop-down box. It is at the moment on the screens there on the live document. Okay, and that's me for...
No, it's brilliant. And I think thank you to everyone who wrote in your questions. That gives us really good feedback about whether the changes we're proposing to make are right, whether they're going to satisfy the way that you use the form. So continue just to write in your questions because they're helpful to us during our review process. As Martin and Adam have said, when the changes have been made, we're going to process them through like some legal consultation to make sure they're all sorted. And then if you're an ACE New Zealand or an Engineering New Zealand member, we're going to make this a big hurrah about, hey, new producer statements. So if you're members of either of ours and you subscribe to our new stuff, you'll be made aware of when the final versions are ready for you guys to start using. So yeah, and as a couple of people have already asked, part of the review process is about making them more user-friendly. So there have been requests about whether or not we can offer Word versions, and as Adam very eloquently answered, it's a fine line between protecting the terms and conditions and those important bits that the BCAs and the client organizations trust that are standard conditions, but also that fine line of making them usable for you guys to enter fields. So we are considering using technology to make some of these things a lot easier. We're asking for you guys to give us more feedback on whether or not you think that you'll use this technology. If you will use it, how often, what kind of changes. So let me walk through what we're proposing. And again, if you like what we're proposing, if you think you would use it, please tell us that so that we've got the support behind us so that we can invest appropriately. So I will switch to my next slides. As I've just said, we want your feedback. I'll kind of go back and forth. So what we're proposing is basically that the producer statements might be turned into smart forms, and that might entail you going to a web browser platform rather than an editable PDF, rather than a Word document. You type into your web browser and you say, I want to do the PS1 form. Right now we're proposing that we kind of do a trial run with the PS suite, so PS1, PS2, and PS4. And as you kind of see, these are little screenshots of what that web page would look like. On the left side, let me get the pointer going. There we go, hopefully. Okay, maybe the green pointer is not working so much, but it's close enough that you can kind of see. We've got some check boxes for you to identify which form you want to use. All right, the pointer is very slow, so I might just stop using that. And then the next page would be, that's where you type in all your form fields. So name of the design firm, name of the owner, BCA client. We've got the potential to autofill some or to have you type it in, but the idea is that as you type things in, you won't have to repetitively type in the exact same information over and over again. So name of the design firm, you're not going to have to type that in 5 different times using that smart form technology. It's got all the area for you to type in, describe the building works, address, lot, SO, that kind of stuff, because one of the big complaints we've got is I run out of room on the PDF forms, and we completely understand that. And it's about that fine line of offering some sort of protected document that still is more user-friendly. So this is one of the solutions we're proposing. Using this smart form technology, there is the capability to link in other commonly used documents. So for example, if you're filling in the PS1, using this new smart form technology, you could also link up the certificate of building work, potentially the design features report. Like, those are just examples of the capability we want to be able to offer. And again, as you've typed in certain information to fields, for example, the design firm, it would be carried over to these other forms, reducing the amount of typing you have to do, saving you time, and packaging things up really nicely. So the other kind of screenshot I've got here is through the smart forms technology, you can also incorporate kind of email notifications so that if, let's say, an administrative person is filling this out, but it needs to go to person A for review, but person B for signature, it kind of saves up a draft so that you don't have to worry about attaching, PDF version 1, PDF version 2 to 2.2 or whatever. Like, it's just a hyperlink that different people can click on, and it'll take you to where you are in that saved document. So I'll go back to the other one. Yeah, so these are just screenshots basically of the type of smart fields in that smart form tool. And as I've mentioned, our hopes is that this technology would enable us to connect documentation, possibly, and again, based on your feedback, we don't want to invest a bunch of money and a bunch of time if this is something that you guys as our members and users aren't going to use, or if it's not going to help you do your work better. So if you're in support of this, type in the comments, email us, let us know you're in support of us trialing that. And the plan is that we'll set up a pilot program for maybe 3 to 6 months, again, for the producer statements 1, 2, and 4, for you guys to use for about 3 to 6 months. Based on how many people use it, the feedback we get from using it, we would then, both of our organizations, Engineering New Zealand and ACE New Zealand, look at, is this something we should continue to invest in? Should we expand the offering to, say, the short form agreement or CCCS, sub-consultant agreement? That kind of thing are commonly used contracts and documents. And it's all based on you, the user, the feedback you give us, how much we use it. Because again, the last thing we want to do is invest heaps of time and money and then only have a handful of people use them, or use them and say, this actually isn't going to be good for us. So that's kind of just a summary of what we're proposing with the smart forms. And I will try now to read through the questions and see if I need to answer anything. Comments on the use of electronic signatures. Through the software, yes, the software is provided by LawHawk, which is a lawyer agency. So, and we also have our own legal panel review that, whether or not it's safe and appropriate to use, but it wouldn't be less than what you're currently being offered in the PDF forms, where you can do the signatures through the editable PDF. Let's see. I suggest that where a producer statement form needs to be altered to cover or exclude a specific set of conditions, then that should be clearly shown as strikeouts and or add-ins so that all parties can clearly see any variations. That's something that we can work through. Again, if you guys say we've got enough support to invest in this plan, that's something we can probably work in. And at the end of the smart platform, so you're online typing in your stuff, after people have reviewed it and signed off, there is the potential that it can be exported in different file formats. PDF and Word are the commonly available formats. Now, whether or not that's something we would offer, again, we'll need to do some testing around that, but the capability is there. So another question, with the smart forms, can we add things like refer Schedule X for the drawings, or is there form validation that prevents this? So yes, again, the software has capabilities so that if in your form you need to refer to, let's say, those geotechnical reports or drawings or something like that, there is the capability for you to upload documents that you are basing your declaration or the form on. So that is a capability for you to upload your own documents, JPEGs, PDFs, other things like that. Let's see, question, I think I'm on question 47. Can we have a unique serial number for the forms? From my testing on the software, yes, if you type up one form and you save it and you get it emailed to yourself, and that hyperlink is unique to that specific form, so that then if you go back and you do a different project, you'll have a completely different saved form. Whether or not we can add a serial number to that, I'll need to investigate that with the software provider. But again, thanks for writing that in. We will refer back to these comments to see what we can and cannot address for you.
Possibly, Holly, it would be answered by putting in the reference number.
So on the PDF form, exactly. So next question, using the SmartForm technology, is this going to make things easier for a producer statement register? Martin, I might have you answer that because I'm not 100%. Is that like the BCA?
Just reading my emails. What was the question?
Using the SmartForm technology, is this going to make things easier for a producer statement register?
Good question. I don't think that it would have any impact off the top of my head. It's intended to make things easier for you. I know that when I was working as an engineer, we spent a fair amount of time filling out the various forms, for a job, even if you're just doing a simple beam in a house, for example, you'd have God knows how many forms to accompany it. And what we're trying to do is to cut down on that time and make things a lot simpler for you. I don't see off the top of my head how that would affect a producer statement register.
Thanks for that. We just have another, I'm interpreting it as a comment more than a question, that one user, their office is in support of trying a new input system, but they also don't see any issue with the current PDF set. So thank you for letting us know that the PDFs are working for some, and hopefully the changes that we've outlined, that Martin's outlined, will help other users with some common frustrations in the usability of these forms. Another question, I would be in support of the online forms. However, I want a company or specific user profile to be developed so you can sign in and use the data you've entered previously. So yes, that is absolutely a capability that this software has. Whether or not, because that's at a different level of investment for us, so whether we make that available to all members as a benefit of membership, we're not sure. Again, we're going to ask you to give us that feedback, and during the, if we proceed with this trial, you guys using it and backing that up with the data so that we know it's something worthwhile to invest further in. But the software does have that capability. That potentially firms could have their own version with their logo and their standard information. Whether or not that's something that we're going to offer standard, we'll have to see. But the capability is there. So let's see, another question. Can you include a feature to import a table for the list of documents that are referenced? So yes, again, you can upload other documents. I think that's how I'm interpreting your question. And it is possible through the software in that email confirmation. Here's the data you've entered. Here are the attachments you've provided, and it's kind of like a summary document like that, so that it's all wrapped up and packaged neatly. And you don't have to worry about, oh, did I forget to attach that document to this email version? So there absolutely is that capability. How would information be stored, as some clients will have restrictions on share project specifics, such as for Defense Force projects? I don't have the specifics in front of me, but the company that we're working on this, they have forwarded me some information on the latest and greatest security and what compliances they're following, so we can get that information and share it with our users if we do go down that platform. So again, I've already answered that one, sorry. How would each company have their own login which would auto-populate the company name? Could we use a RealMe style login? Concerns around other companies entering a PS1 on your behalf. Good question. So hopefully the BCAs know that if they get a submitted form from company A and it's been sent from company C, they'll be like, hey, now this does not line up. And there's always risk, and even with the current PDF versions, that is a risk. But we're going to do everything we can to prevent that. And again, with the logins, if you do end up having your own company login, the protections around that company login should be managed by your company. And so with a strong password, that kind of stuff. It's kind of similar to when you log in to the member sites for Engineering New Zealand and ACE New Zealand. You have a login that's specific to you. You have a specific password. And the strength of that password, so it's kind of the same. You'd have that kind of login capability, and that's where your protection would lie, is protecting your password and making sure it's strong so that nobody logs in pretending to be you, basically.
Not only that, Holly, but if we're coming back to that reference number again, that's a unique number by your firm, then that makes it more fraud resistant as well.
Excellent. Brilliant. So it's good. So far, we've already had a couple people type in that they probably use that, potentially could make filling in the forms more versatile. Would be good to have the option not to fill in bits and still move forward in the form. For example, you don't always have the lot and DP number for the site. And again, through my testing of kind of the draft version that we've got up is that you do have that capability, that kind of save form for later, so that you can fill in the field inputs that you've got. If you don't have all the information, you can come back later. We would work with kind of the review committee, Martin, myself, Adam. We'd have other expert users kind of review the stuff before we release it, so that we would determine which fields are going to be required to proceed and which ones are kind of those optional fields. You know, when you fill in an online form, it's got that red asterisk for a mandatory field. So we would figure out which fields need to be mandatory and which fields are more optional, but that save for later feature is definitely there. Okay, I think that was a two-part question. Online security on the forms will be important. And yeah, absolutely, we'd publicize what sort of security your data that you're entering is under this platform. So that would be made available so that everyone knows what kind of security and protection your information is being held with. Should also add in a B2 letter in lieu option for selecting standard references, engineering elements covered as part of the PS1, a risk register list of inspection required. So I'm assuming these are all suggestions for things you'd like, and thank you for putting that in the comments. We'll be able to refer back to that when kind of looking at how this test pilot platform and period will be. From a security perspective, how would the signature be added onto smart forms and prevented from being used by others? I think that's kind of been answered, similar to how it's done on the current PDF version. It would be protected in that way, but we will look more into this and make sure that we're not going to provide a platform that can be easily fraudulent used, so that it can be relatively safe, like other platforms that you might do digital or not do digital signatures on. We'll look into that. All right, so I think I'll probably, because we are close to time and Adam still has to do his version, so I'll hand over to Adam. And I think, like it's been said, if you do have to dash away, this is being recorded and will be made available to both Engineering New Zealand and ACE members at a later time.
Okay. Thanks, Holly. I'll try and make this pretty quick. I'm going to talk to you about a new series of producer statements. As of course we all know that the standard forms which we've been talking about this morning relate only to either applying for a building consent or for applying for a co-compliance certificate. So it's really only applicable to Building Act issues now, or in fact building consent issues. Now of course many of us practitioners get asked for some form of producer statement or sign-off letter, whatever you want to call it, for other activities, and there are quite a few of those, and so that's what this series I'm going to show you is about. Maybe A is for alternative. It is, you'd have to say that they are, excuse me, there are a number of ways they could be used, but it is important that they are only to be issued to some form of regulatory authority. So that might be still might be a building consent authority under a Schedule 1 issue. It could be, I don't know, NZTA or some other regulatory authority who wants some form of, if you like, sign-off or engineering opinion that something has been designed or constructed in accordance with some regulation. We would caution that it's not intended just to give your client additional support, or sorry, comfort, I should say. So the client says, "Oh, well, you've done this. I don't know, you've done this stormwater design for you. Can we give you a producer statement, even though it's not subject to a building consent?" The answer is you shouldn't give one to just a client. Your obligations to a client are covered under your standard conditions of engagement that you have with your client. So, moving on. So some potential uses we've got listed here. It could be for infrastructure works, some roading works. It could be temporary works. It could be, let's say, Schedule 1 building consent exempt works. Could be various issues relating to subdivisions, tow bars, amusement devices, tower crane foundations, those sorts of things. Things that don't require a building consent. So, look, I'll just repeat. That's a repeat of what I've just told you before. It is important that are specifically intended for use issued to a relevant regulatory authority. They should not be used to provide comfort to your client. I've just reiterated that because it is very important. Okay, so this I'm not expecting you to look at those. The current form of these are in the more traditional style, but I'm going to blow up. So there's a PS1A, there's a PS2A, and we'll look at those a little bit closely so you can see what's involved. So it's a similar issue, but so similar wording to the standard forms. So it's, you know, there's a description of work. You've got a list of who the design firm is, who the client and the regulatory authority is, and then you're saying you've been engaged by the client to provide design services in terms of specific elements, and then the statements say the design carried out by us has been prepared in accordance with the following compliance documents, regulatory requirements and/or standards and guidelines. Now, and then there's a legal definition here. We're calling these things below compliance documents. These are not the same things as the Building Act compliance documents. These are just things that are, in terms of a legal documentation, we are defining these items below as potential compliance documents. So it could be a New Zealand standard, code of practice, a bylaw. It could be a resource consent requirement, or various other things. So that's the sort of top half of the PS1 page. And then there's the bottom half, which similar statements on behalf of the design firm and subject to usual qualifications. And then you're saying that this is where it's slightly different, that you believe on reasonable grounds the elements of the works that have been designed by the design firm, if constructed in accordance with the drawing specifications, will comply with the relevant provisions of the compliance documents listed above. And then the standard thing that the person is undertaking, you're satisfied the person has the necessary competency to do so. And so it's quite similar, but what you're saying is rather than that the design works complies with the building code, you are saying it complies with a specific, if you like, compliance document or some form of standard. And then there's the usual statements down the bottom. So that's the PS1. Now the PS2, move on to that top half. So you've been engaged to review the design documentations for the works. So we're calling it works rather than a building in respect to compliance with the following things. So it's very similar to the PS1. And then there's the usual qualifications. I've added an extra one here, which those who do peer reviews will understand, so that you're is subject to responses provided by the design firm as recorded in the attached log. Because when you do a review, you tend to ask the designer their questions, and you satisfy yourself as to their answer. But you are relying on what they tell you to some extent. Yeah, so then you're saying the same sort of statement, that you're satisfied that you read the drawings and that they you're satisfied that they comply with the relevant compliance document. I'll jump straight on. Then there is, sorry, beg your pardon. The right button. Here we go. There is also a PS4A, and there's a guidance sheet. So we'll look through those in a bit more detail very quickly. So the PS4, an essential difference here, of course, with a PS4, you're saying a standard PS4, you're giving an opinion that work has been completed in accordance with an issued consent. What we're saying here is that you're satisfied that the works have been completed in accordance with the document that was issued with the PS1A. So just reiterating that you're not relating to a consent. You're relating the construction monitoring to compliance with documents that were issued with a previously issued producer statement. Just read through this. Construction monitoring account relates to the elements of works referred to in the attached PS1A. Design producer statement issued prior to commencement of works. The construction monitoring also relates to the authorised instructions. Usual sort of stuff. It's just worth reading this bit here. On the basis of this construction monitoring, together with the information provided by the contractor during the course of the works and on behalf of the construction monitoring firm, I believe that on reasonable grounds that these elements of works are being completed with the relevant requirements of the design documentation that accompanied the PS1A. Okay, so you might note that this refers to construction monitoring firm rather than design firm. I think, and we've also referred to design review firm rather than design firm for the PS2. We've been able to do that because we've separated from the architect, and they didn't do construction monitoring. So that's just a slight change there. All right, so I'll just flick on quickly to the guidance page. So again, look, it's similar stuff. It makes a few comments here. Self-explanatory for building consent application or application for a CC. The original producer statement should be used. For a non-regulatory organisation or any obligation to provide producer statements, and the wording should be agreed with the client as part of the engagement before work starts. And I think that's pretty standard stuff. So, look, I've rushed through that and I haven't looked at any questions, so I'll look at those now. Are there any questions? Where am I looking? Right.
Adam, can you see the questions?
I'm not sure if I can see them.
Maybe a checkbox.
That's okay. I'll read them out to you. So the first one we have is maybe a checkbox for international standards.
Yep, good idea. Yep, there is another box. Yep, and I think there is a standards box, so I don't know that it necessarily has to be a New Zealand standard box.
Next one is, I note that for infrastructure work undertaken for the New Zealand Transport Agency, they have their own producer statement forms. Are the A series PS documents intended to replace these?
That's a good question, and there are other agencies like Watercare in Auckland who have their own forms. Look, I guess it would be our desire and intent that they do replace those, and I guess over time they might get modified to suit to meet requirements for some of those particular organisations. But yes, some of the ones that are produced by, if you like, regulatory organisations are very onerous. And I think Watercare fell into that category. So this time around we haven't these haven't been reviewed with various regulatory authorities. I guess our view was it's better to get them out on the marketplace. Let's start using them, and then perhaps we do a review if we need to, if we get pushback in some areas. But yeah, so the answer to the question is yes, our intention is that this becomes a standard form that all engineers, practitioner engineers, can use for different types of projects and works when some form of producer statement, professional opinion is being asked for.
And the next one's an excellent question, actually. Can you please provide some insights on how and whether a CPEng should issue a PS4 with appropriate construction monitoring completed on another CPEng's consented to design from another firm? Also, what if you do not agree with some design aspects from that designer?
Yes, well, I think we touched on this before. If you are, if you like, have a separate commission to carry out construction monitoring when you're not the designer, and look, in some parts of the world that's quite a common occurrence. Then I guess, look, first of all, you're obliged to get your head around the design documentation and to understand some of the designer's intent, because when you're doing construction monitoring, you always need to know what the design intent was, as well as what the documentations tell you. I mean, if at the end of the day, when you are giving a PS4, you are giving a statement to say that you're satisfied that works have been completed in accordance with what has been consented. A PS4 does not say, I'm satisfied that this work is in accordance with the building code. It is saying, or any other standard for that matter, other form of compliance documentation. You are saying that you're satisfied that what's been drawn, if you like, and specified has been built. Now, if you have a serious concern about what has been designed, that's another matter which you should raise, I would have thought, with the designer.
Thank you. The next question that we have, typo. Thank you for spotting that. It doesn't matter how often, many times you read through them, there's always another one. So the next one is, can a company not BCA require a producer statement document even if it's, okay, so that's, you've just been answering that one, Adam. Next question, has there been an increase from regulatory agencies requesting for this, so that's why Series A is being looked into?
I think the answer to that is yes. There have been, and there are, and I've mentioned a couple of them. Well, I think Auckland City is asking for them for quite a lot of their infrastructure works, so that's guest works and roading and subdivision type works. Watercare has a form, and I think NZTA has some form of it as well.
And for construction monitoring, compaction, QA and testing, which producer statement form do you recommend for this work only for geotechnical engineers?
Look, I'm not an expert in that field, but there is a series of forms about compaction. Someone will type in what the number and name of those forms are. Whether those get replaced by this is perhaps up for debate.
Good as gold. Looks like we've potentially got another couple of questions coming. Maybe very long questions.
For that, I can see that question. So why would we also have NZBC code clauses? That would be for, as I thought I mentioned, that if for example you're doing something under Schedule 1, so something that doesn't require a building consent, but the local authority does want some sort of sign off from the engineer, because under Schedule 1 things still have to comply with the building code, but not with a issued consent. So that's, hopefully that answers the question.
Sorry, we just had a big jump and.
Would you use them for certificate of acceptance? I think no. Look, you need to just think very hard about the liabilities that accrue for those certificates of acceptance. I think I would suggest that's probably better done with a very carefully worded letter.
Following up from the previous question, we cannot give you legal advice. When you're saying the answer I got from the original designer was quite dismissive to some extent, which I know for sure is not in strict accordance with the building code requirements, what is my legal obligation here? Send me an email and I will reply and we can talk about things.
Yeah.
But I don't think that this webinar is the place for
yeah, but that's an ethics question, isn't it? So it is. You do have some obligations if you have serious concerns about something. Look, the next practice note 19. Remind me, what's practice note 19?
That's seismic restraint of pressure equipment.
No, I mean that's a slightly different issue, isn't it? I mean, a practice note. I guess maybe it could. I have to say I'm not an expert on the pressure equipment side of it. If it's something that's in a building and requires is subject to building code requirements, then no, you should use the original standard forms.
Okay, so the next one's for me, really. Were any comments on Auckland Council practice of running their own producer statement author register with additional requirements and costs in addition to CPENG? Is this something that Engineering New Zealand supports? It is onerous for non-Auckland engineers who only do occasional work there. Yeah, we understand that. We have been engaging with Auckland Council on this, and it's not part of the work that I personally am doing. As far as I'm aware, they got reasonably close to some outcomes, and things got hung up on finances.
Yeah, look, it's something that's been queried for many years, and there was at one stage a suggestion that the standard chartered professional engineer register could have more information, but it got too complicated. At the moment, we just have to live with it, unfortunately.
Do we have an email, Adam, that we can forward questions to as well? If you send them on to Holly and I, then we will send them on to Adam. Yeah,
just that last question from Chris Somerville. I think the top of the form is different. The standard form says producer statement, a design, and this does say whatever it says. It's round the other way. So it is. That's a good point. Maybe you can, with the new formatting that Holly and Martin are talking about, it could be highlighted a bit more. But I think, you've always got to read the fine print to understand what you're signing anyway, or what you're reviewing for that matter. Right, are we near the end?
I think we are pretty close to it. Thanks, Stuart, for your attendance. Appreciate it. can the council insist on a PS4 even though there are no conditions in the issued building consent requiring one? If you've issued a PS1, shouldn't you be issuing a PS4?
My thought on that is that if they want one, they should ask for one at the building consent conditions, because you know, then hopefully the owner or the architect or whoever's got the building consent will let you know, and you can make sure you do the required level of construction monitoring. If it's a relatively minor work and you're not proposing to do construction monitoring and the council haven't asked for one, I think it's a bit tough to ask for it at the end of the project. So you could always try a determination.
And a question that was earlier asked earlier, and I didn't get to answer in my part of it, was around bridge design and the LBP. I thought that I had, no, actually, I think I did answer that. Your LBP status is for working on residential buildings. As far as I'm aware, a bridge isn't typically considered to be a residential building.
But it is considered to be a building, so it does require a standard producer statement. So, look, I would have to say, in my opinion, they should be signed off by a CPEng.
Yep. Okay, I think that's just about us. We will look. Thank you for all the feedback, everybody. We certainly appreciate it. We have got a lot to work with, and we'll be going over all of the questions and the answers, all of the feedback that you have provided, and taking that on board. Yes, as Adam said, we will get a draft and plaster draft or something out there. And for the future. In the meantime, Adam, thank you so much for your time. It's greatly appreciated. And Holly, thank you for your time too.
No problem. It was a pleasure.